Welcome to the Nonfiction Insights channel.
Glad to be here.
Today we're doing something a little different.
A deep dive.
Yeah, into this book, The Almanack of Naval Ravikant, A Guide to Wealth and Happiness. All right, so Naval kicks things off by defining wealth.
And he makes it clear right from the start, wealth is not the same as money.
Yeah, he actually distinguishes between wealth, money, and status.
He defines wealth as assets that earn while you sleep.
So things like businesses you own, investments that generate passive income.
Without your direct, constant effort.
Money, on the other hand, is simply a tool
It's a medium of exchange.
for transferring wealth and time,
And then there's status,
which is all about your position in the social hierarchy.
where you stand in the pecking order.
So, like, if I'm obsessed with getting a promotion just for the bragging rights,
That's more about chasing status.
not really building wealth,
Exactly. And Naval argues that these status games can be a huge distraction.
a waste of energy.
Energy that could be better spent building something that actually creates value.
So instead of worrying about what other people think of your job title,
Focus on building assets that can generate income while you sleep,
because let's be honest, you're not going to get rich by just trading your time for money.
even if it's a high-paying job.
You hit the nail on the head. Naval says the real path to financial freedom lies in ownership.
Having equity, a piece of a business,
When you're an owner, you directly benefit from the growth of that venture.
it's not just about getting paid for the hours you put in.
But how do you create that kind of wealth in the first place,
Well, Naval says wealth is created by giving society what it wants
but doesn't yet know how to get?
and doing it at scale.
He used the example of Steve Jobs and the iPhone.
People didn't exactly walk around saying, I need a smartphone.
But once it existed, it filled a huge unmet need.
It's about anticipating those latent desires and delivering on them.
Okay, so you have to spot the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
But what else do you need to actually build wealth?
Naval highlights a few essential components. The first is specific knowledge.
And this isn't just any skill you can pick up in a weekend seminar.
It's knowledge that can't be easily taught or replicated.
If it can be trained, someone can be trained to replace you,
Specific knowledge is often found by following your genuine curiosity,
your passions,
the stuff that feels like play to you.
but looks like work to others,
You know, that thing you could spend hours doing.
even if you weren't getting paid for it.
It's often learned through apprenticeships,
Real-world experience.
not just formal education.
And it's highly technical or creative.
So it's hard to outsource or automate.
The book gives examples like being a great salesperson
Having a unique musical talent,
or a deep, almost obsessive understanding of a particular niche.
like science fiction or game theory.
So it's really about leaning into what makes you, you.
Absolutely.
Okay, the next element is accountability.
And this is about taking risks.
Putting your name on the line.
Naval argues that society rewards you when you're willing to own the outcomes.
Both good and bad.
Sure, there's a risk of failure.
But he says the downside is often not as bad as we think.
Even bankruptcy can be a fresh start
It's about building trust and credibility.
by showing that you're responsible.
Okay, and then there's leverage, which is about multiplying your efforts.
Naval talks about 3 types of leverage.
Let's unpack those.
The first one is capital, which is essentially money.
But you need specific knowledge, accountability, and good judgment to use it effectively.
The second type is labor.
Having other people work for you.
This is the oldest form of leverage, but Naval calls it permissioned leverage.
Someone has to agree to work for you.
And he even suggests, don't make it your primary focus in life.
It might impress your parents, but...
There's a better way.
So what's the third type of leverage?
The most powerful one, especially in the modern world.
Is permissionless leverage.
Products with no marginal cost of replication.
Things like code, media, content,
Once you create it, it can be distributed to millions.
with almost no additional cost. So a software engineer writes code once,
And that code can be used by countless users.
without them having to do any extra work.
And that's the engine behind a lot of the new wealth creation we see.
So writing code that solves a problem for lots of people, that's leverage.
Even if you're just one person.
Because your skills and insights are embedded in that code,
And it can work for you 24/7
reaching a global audience.
without needing your constant attention.
Now, to tie this all together, the book emphasizes the importance of developing judgment.
It's not enough to just have these components.
You need to know how to use them effectively.
Judgment, in Naval's words, is wisdom applied to external problems.
Understanding the long-term consequences of your actions.
And making good decisions.
And in an age of leverage, where one good decision can have a huge impact.
Judgment becomes even more valuable.
But how do you actually develop good judgment?
One way is by focusing on learning fundamental skills.
He specifically recommends studying microeconomics, game theory, psychology.
Persuasion, ethics, mathematics, and computer science.
Notice he says to avoid superficial business news and trends
And instead, focus on the underlying principles.
that govern how the world works. So build a strong foundation.
In these different disciplines,
He also talks about setting a high personal hourly rate,
which might sound a bit odd.
but the idea is to use it as a filter for your time.
If a task is worth less than your rate, either ignore it or delegate it.
It forces you to value your time.
And focus on activities that generate the highest return.
So ruthless prioritization.
Exactly.
And ultimately, the goal is to become the best in the world at what you do.
Which is, of course, very ambitious.
Yeah. But Naval stresses that you need to keep refining what you do.
Until that statement becomes true,
It might take years, even decades.
to figure out what you can uniquely offer.
He also talks about authenticity as a way to avoid competition.
The idea is that if you build and market something that's truly an expression of yourself,
Nobody can compete with you on that.
because it's so intrinsically linked to who you are.
All right, so we've covered Naval's framework for building wealth.
Yeah, let's dive into the second key idea from the Almanac, the importance of judgment and clear thinking.
He even says that being called a clear thinker is a greater compliment than being called smart.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's because clear thinking is about understanding things deeply.
Not just having a lot of knowledge.
It's about being able to explain complex ideas in simple terms.
Like Richard Feynman could do.
So how do we cultivate this clear thinking?
Naval says one key is to see reality without the distortions of ego.
Or preconceived notions?
Our desires and our beliefs about how things should be often clouded our judgment.
We don't see things as they really are.
And sometimes suffering can actually help us see more clearly.
It forces us to confront reality.
To let go of our illusions.
It also talks about creating empty space for thinking.
In a world that's constantly demanding our attention.
Scheduling time for reflection can feel almost radical.
But it's essential.
Breakthroughs often come from those moments of stillness.
Where your mind can wander and make new connections.
So be proactive about creating that mental space.
Even if it's just for a few hours a week.
He also talks about contrarian thinking.
Which is about thinking independently.
Resisting the urge to just follow the crowd.
It's about forming your own opinions based on your own understanding of reality.
Even if those opinions are unpopular. He also mentions this idea of shedding your identity to see reality.
Which sounds pretty deep.
It is. It's about detaching from your ingrained beliefs and habits.
To examine them critically.
And see if they're still serving you.
We often hold on to beliefs just because they've become part of our identity.
But that can prevent us from seeing new possibilities.
And making necessary changes.
So maintain a flexible mindset.
Don't get too attached to a fixed sense of self.
Okay, now let's talk about decision-making.
Because that's obviously crucial for both wealth and happiness.
Naval highlights the value of classical virtues.
As long-term guides for decision-making.
He encourages us to make clear decisions in the moment.
Rather than overthinking things.
He also suggests building a repertoire of mental models.
From different fields like evolution, game theory, economics, and psychology.
These mental models help us anticipate outcomes.
Make more informed decisions.
It's like having a toolbox full of different perspectives.
To approach different problems.
He also talks about using inversion,
Which is a powerful problem-solving technique.
where you think about how to achieve the opposite of your goal.
So instead of asking what will make this successful,
You ask, what could make this fail?
by identifying the potential pitfalls, you can often clarify the path to success,
And he also stresses the importance of basic math.
which might not seem like an essential skill for everyone.
But he argues that a solid grasp of arithmetic, probability, and statistics,
Is crucial for making sound judgments.
especially in financial matters.
You don't need advanced math for most things.
But understanding the fundamentals is essential. Naval also has some very specific advice for decision-making,
Like his rule, if you can't decide, the answer is no.
for big, long-term decisions.
The logic is that if you're not feeling a strong yes,
It's probably not the right choice.
especially for things like marriage, career changes, or starting a major project,
And then there's the run-uphill heuristic.
which is about choosing the more difficult path.
When faced with two equally appealing options,
The idea is that the easier choice often leads to bigger problems down the road.
It's about pushing through that initial resistance.
To achieve better long-term outcomes.
Finally, on the topic of clear thinking, Naval strongly advocates learning to love reading.
He sees it as a superpower.
He encourages reading what you truly enjoy.
Until you develop a love for the act of reading itself.
And he emphasizes focusing on deep understanding and retention.
Not just skimming through books.
He also recommends reading the greats in math, science, and philosophy.
To build a strong intellectual foundation.
Okay, now let's move on to the third big idea from the Almanac. Learning and choosing happiness.
Right, so Naval starts by saying happiness is learned, not found.
It's a bold statement.
But he makes the case that happiness is a skill.
Something you can cultivate and improve over time.
Like physical fitness.
You don't just stumble upon happiness.
You make a conscious choice.
And you develop the habits that support it.
He also reminds us that our minds are malleable.
We're not stuck with our negative thought patterns.
We can change them.
He also says happiness requires presence.
Being in the moment.
Letting go of dwelling on the past or worrying about the future.
He even quotes a definition of enlightenment as the space between your thoughts.
Which is such a powerful image.
It suggests that true peace and happiness can be found in simply being present.
Rather than constantly chasing after the next thing. And cultivating inner peace seems to be a key part of finding that presence.
Absolutely. He argues that happiness necessitates peace.
Which comes from accepting reality as it is.
Every desire we have creates a potential for unhappiness.
Because it highlights the gap between what we have and what we want.
He believes the fundamental illusion is that external things will bring lasting happiness.
But true fulfillment is an internal state. He also calls envy the enemy of happiness.
Which connects back to our earlier discussion about status games.
Envy is all about comparison.
And it breeds constant dissatisfaction.
He also advises eliminating shoulds from your vocabulary.
Because they often represent societal pressures or feelings of guilt.
Things we feel obligated to do rather than genuinely want to do. So freeing ourselves from those external and internal pressures is key.
He also links happiness to our daily habits.
He specifically mentions avoiding excessive alcohol, sugar, and social media.
All of which can have a negative impact on our well-being.
He also emphasizes choosing your friends wisely.
Because you tend to become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
And avoiding those who are constantly engaged in negativity and conflict. He also talks about finding happiness through acceptance.
When faced with a situation you dislike, you have 3 choices.
Change it, accept it, or leave it.
But often we stay stuck in a state of wishing things were different.
Without taking any action.
So his advice is simple but powerful. Accept.
He also has a pretty stark perspective on legacy.
He argues that the idea of leaving a lasting legacy is mostly an illusion.
We'll all be gone eventually.
And so will our creations.
So he encourages us to focus on the present moment.
Finding meaning in the here and now.
And he really emphasizes personal responsibility for our own well-being.
He gives examples like, doctors won't make you truly healthy.
Gurus won't make you genuinely calm.
Ultimately, you have to save yourself.
By taking ownership of your own physical and mental health. And he encourages choosing to be yourself.
Which ties back to the idea of authenticity in building wealth.
No one can be better at being you than you are.
So don't try to imitate others.
Embrace what makes you unique.
He also underscores the importance of self-care.
Diet, exercise, sleep.
He has this great saying, easy choices, hard life. Hard choices, easy life.
Meaning that making the difficult but beneficial choices now
will lead to a more fulfilling life in the long run.
He even suggests practical tips like having walking meetings.
To incorporate exercise into your day.
And meditation is another key practice he recommends.
He calls it intermittent fasting for the mind.
It's about observing your thoughts without judgment.
Quieting the mental chatter.
And accessing a deeper level of awareness. And he sees the ability to change ourselves through habits as a superpower.
He stresses the importance of taking action.
Building systems, not just setting goals.
And being patient with results.
He also makes a distinction between freedom to and freedom from.
He says he used to value the freedom to do anything he wanted.
But now he prioritizes freedom from negative emotions like anger.
And freedom from external pressures and expectations.
He sees anger as a loss of control.
And he believes true freedom comes from mastering our own minds.
Finally, he talks about the meaning of life.
Which he says is either personal.
Something each individual must define for themselves.
Or there is no inherent meaning.
And we must create our own.
Either way, the message is to find or create your own sense of purpose,
and live in accordance with your values.
focusing on present moment awareness.
He even mentions rational Buddhism as a helpful philosophy. So, the Almanack of Naval Ravikant is a really rich source of insights.
On building both financial wealth and a fulfilling life.
By focusing on specific knowledge, accountability, leverage,
And cultivating clear thinking, sound judgment, and the choice of happiness.
Naval offers a really compelling roadmap for navigating our complex world.
We hope this deep dive has given you some valuable takeaways.
Some of those aha moments.
What are some of the principles that resonated most with you?
What new questions has this exploration sparked?
We encourage you to delve deeper into the Almanack of Naval Ravikant yourself.
And see how these ideas might apply to your own life.
Thanks for joining us on Nonfiction Insights.
Be sure to subscribe to the Nonfiction Insights channel.
For more deep dives into thought-provoking books and ideas.
We'll see you in the next one.